Hi everyone, my name is Robin Smith and I'm the Communications Director for the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. For those who may not know, the Oregon Cattlemen's Association represents ranchers, farmers, family-owned businesses, and private property owners across the state. We are an association that starts from the grassroots at the county level and works its way up to state and also federally. We are focused on improving and protecting Oregon's cattle industry. Today, we are expanding our communication platform virtually, and we're going to give this a shot with a little Skype interview that we have going here. We hope that this platform can be used as a new tool for you to stay updated with what OCA is working on. So today, for our first interview, we have the Oregon Cattlemen's Association President Tom Sharp, and he's coming to us from Burns out in Harney County. How are you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing just fine, Robin. Yeah, this is my first experiment as a test pilot of using this Zoom technology, so we'll see how it goes because I think it's going to become a bigger part of our life.
So how have you all been holding up out there in Harney County? How's your family doing? What are you hearing out there?
Thanks for asking. We're doing well. I need a haircut. A lot of people need haircuts. We miss our grandkids. We haven't been able to travel and see. My wife dearly wants to go out to a restaurant again.
Yes.
Getting tired of cooking all the meals here at the house. But, we've been consumed with a lot of the normal spring chores here on the ranch. We started receiving cattle here for grazing yesterday, actually, and we got more coming in at our other location here in a week or so. So the grass is growing. The fence has been mended. So far, the cattle are where they're supposed to be. And so, it's a good place to, if you're a rancher, social distancing is easy to accommodate because, in our case, we live 6 miles from our nearest neighbors. So it's just the ability to get out and see people, get your hair cut, get out to the restaurants that we probably miss the most.
Definitely. I know there's a lot of people out there feeling the same way. For me, for one, I can't wait for restaurants to open again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how about, can you give us a little update on what OCA has been working on and how they are handling different issues and staying afloat during this time?
Yeah, great question. OCA has been spending most of its time doing two things. One is advocating for our producers, and the other one is communicating to our producers. And we're as an organization, as an association, I think we're fully on board of protecting the interest of our cow-calf producers through these extremely difficult times that we've been dealing with here. And it's important that our membership know that OCA as an association and our OCA staff, which includes you, Robin, and Ann Kinsey and Jerome Rosa, our executive director, have done I think a wonderful, admirable job of being proactive in reaching out at the national level, advocating for the producers. We've done that in multiple occasions. We advocated and we were successful down at the NCBA National Conference in Austin on passing national resolutions for, targeted grazing by the BLM. That was a success for us. We also advocated and successfully passed a transparency in product labeling, or truth in labeling, as we called it. And we proposed a third resolution nationally that at the time was maybe 30 days ahead of its time in being adopted, but it has since been adopted. And that third resolution was for beef as a commodity to be included in the USDA's market facilitation program. That was presented, and in February, early February, prior to the COVID outbreak. And then within about 30 days later, we had COVID, and the whole world changed for producers everywhere. And so now we have support at all levels for market facilitation program participation to assist our cattle producers. Speaking of that, there's several other programs, and I think our staff is doing just a very proactive job. We realize that that we don't have a beef supply problem in this country. We have a supply chain problem, and being able to put it on the plate of the consumer. We, if we were ideally, we'd have a healthy supply chain, and both figurative and literally, we have an unhealthy supply chain right now. Most of the bottleneck is at the major packer facilities, where they have workers unable to do their job because of health and COVID-19 virus issues occurring there. So their capacity of throughput is diminished. But we're doing things to assist the local producer here in the state of Oregon. And Robin, you've headed up one, and I'll just flash this up as a reminder card of the effort that is going on to provide greater flexibility so our local producers can sell locally here within the state of Oregon. And we're addressing that at several levels. So, we can come back to those issues later for more detail, but we've been able as a staff at OCA to adapt, work remotely where it makes sense, forward those phone calls, use teleconferencing or Zoom technology to keep us connected with each other. We've got a great app, so producers, members on our smartphone can go to the Oregon Cattlemen's app. You can use your desktop or laptop computer. We're doing a great job, and thanks to Robin's efforts as our editor of the Oregon Cattleman magazine, providing informative articles out there for us. So that's how we're doing. I think we're working very effectively, even in difficult circumstances.
Yeah, it's definitely been a big change. I know the staff, we've been working from home almost going on 2 months now, I think. So, but that's okay. We have everything set up. I know Anne's been having the phones, forwarded to her cell phone. So she's still answering phone calls. And then I'm still working on a full computer system. So it's been very good. Our last magazine did focus mainly on the COVID-19 issues that we were dealing with and how we can help farmers and ranchers more, and how we have been working, like you mentioned, on the federal level especially, and getting that message out. I did want to say that our social media, the little flyer that you held up, it's been doing very well. Currently, we do have a list of producers that are specifically OCA members that have provided their contact information for local consumers who maybe don't know where to start or where to begin with contacting a farmer, because I think that's a form of communication that gets broken down and missed sometimes, especially if they're urban living or living in the city. So we've had a great effort with that. And then we've had a lot of feedback and a lot of people looking to supply beef in small quantities. So that's been very good as well. I did want to expand a little bit on the market volatility that's been happening, like you mentioned, and it is extremely concerning right now, especially for our producers locally. And like you mentioned, and like I mentioned, we are trying to boost up efforts to sell local. Could you expand a little bit more on how that is going right now?
Sure. It's it quickly can become fairly complex here in understanding, and I certainly don't pretend to have all the answers. If I had all the answers, I probably would be serving a different function here nationally for our country. But the market volatility is the single biggest issue that are facing the producers. There was a study that was sponsored by NCBA that occurred in mid-April, and because of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're dealing with, it's estimated that the U.S. cattle market will lose $13.6 billion this next year. Those are, almost unfathomable numbers. And the biggest sector of the market that will be impacted, unfortunately, is going to be our producers. Our producers, just the losses in the producers segment are estimated to be almost $4.5 billion. And that translates up to a loss of $135 per calf. And we cannot afford that. We have to keep our producer segment alive in this industry. There is profit to be made in beef, but that profit pie has to be sliced fairly for the various segments. So whether you're the producer segment or a backgrounder stocker segment or a feeder segment or a packer segment or a transport segment or a retailer segment, all of those segments are important. They all have to remain healthy, receive, fair compensation for their efforts. Unfortunately, from our perspective, the producers are taking the lion's share of that impact. When you look at the price disparity between what cattle prices are today, which are at a level that we saw about 40 years ago, and you look at the price of boxed beef today, that disparity is, it's an irrational difference there. So what we've done, and Oregon Cattlemen's Association, I'm proud to say, was an early leader in this, is we've been in communication with our USDA Secretary, Sonny Perdue. We've asked for investigations of what in the heck is going on. We have asked for Department of Justice Antitrust Division to step in to investigate any occurrences that might be going on regarding market manipulation or price manipulation, because we know some of our segments here in the supply chain are making record profits, but it's not trickling down to the producer level. And the producer level, which is made up primarily of, the family-owned cow-calf producers out there, they've got to stay in business. The world needs protein. The world needs beef. That's their preferred product. And, we got to keep our producer segment alive during these difficult times. So, that's where some of the effort has been going into. We can get into other details of what might not be functioning right. We could talk about the negotiated price, cash price element of price discovery in beef cattle. We could talk about, what we perceive to be the negatives of formula-based pricing like that. Beef is being treated as just another commodity. We don't produce beef on an assembly line that, if the market demand changes, we can stop that line and stop our production. Raising cattle is a 2-year proposition by the time you make the decision to breed your cows and until they're ready to be brought to the market, consumer market. That's a 2-year ordeal there. Cattle need to go to market when they're ready to go to market. And so we're not like other commodities that can simply say, okay, well, we're going to stop production because the demand isn't there, and so we're just going to put them in inventory. That doesn't work in a livestock commodity there.
Yeah, thank you for expanding on that. Like you said, a lot to unpack there, and maybe we'll be able to go a little bit more in depth. I know there's a lot of efforts that we're working on as far as the market formulation goes on a committee level, so that's exciting, and hopefully we'll have more updates on that as the weeks progress. I did want to touch on a subject that is very important to many producers out there. And hopefully you can give us a little bit more insight on that. Recently, there's been a petition that now has 345,000 signatures urging the president to restore mandatory country of origin labeling. What information can you provide on OCA's stance on that, how we are addressing that issue, and what you can say to ranchers who lie on both sides of the issue?
Yeah, that's an issue that boomerangs back at us repeatedly. You know, what I do believe on mandatory COOL is we've tried it as a country. We tried it for 6 years. It cost the industry, the cattle industry, $1 billion to start it up and implement the tracking systems and reporting systems required to do that. Mandatory COOL is not going to solve, the problems that were dealt with here today. I see no connection between any good that mandatory COOL could provide as a government mandated regulation and the health pandemic that we're dealing with and the profitability or loss of profitability that is being engaged by our producers today. Oregon Cattlemen's Association, our National Cattlemen's Beef Association, support, country of origin labeling. We support truth in labeling. We support the transparency for, programs that exist out there, whether they be beef quality assurance, organic beef, grass finished, what have you. Product of USA labeling, we support those, but we support them as voluntary programs. Our USDA Agricultural Market Service, AMS, they have the systems in place to be able to implement and monitor, the truth in each of those types of programs. But to bring on a mandatory country of origin labeling program again in this country, particularly at this time, it doesn't serve us good. We'd have to also figure out how are we going to track, beef, to the carcass level. Our infrastructure isn't set up with that yet.
Yeah, well, thank you for expanding on that. Kind of on that note, as you mentioned earlier, the Oregon Cattlemen's Association brought a policy to NCBA during their annual meeting, and that had to do with transparency in labeling, and it was adopted. And that has served numerous benefits as we headed into this type of crisis situation that we're in now. Could you expand a little bit more on the process that went through, where it started? I believe it started in Harney County, from what I understand. So any information you have on that?
Yeah, that's a good example, because our transparency in product labeling was driven from the grassroots level. It was first proposed, to my knowledge, here within the Harney County Stock Growers Association. It was brought up as a policy consideration, as a policy resolution consideration in our 2018 annual meeting of OCA. It was adopted by the membership of that annual meeting that Oregon Cattlemen's Association supports truth in labeling. In other words, if beef isn't, bred, raised, and processed in the United States, then don't put a label on the package that says product of the United States. That's just basic truth and honesty, transparency in what we were asking for. So later, it would have been in the time frame of, August of 2019, then President Nathan Jackson, OCA President Nathan Jackson, and myself, we attended the NCBA summer business meeting in Denver, Colorado. And we proposed that as a resolution at that meeting for adoption. It was one of those things that it was shot down at that time. There was all these concerns that, what we were proposing was equivalent to a mandatory country of origin labeling type of mandate. And that wasn't what we were proposing, but it wasn't understood at that time that what we were proposing is simply be truthful to the consumer on how we mark and label our meat products. So a working group was formed after the last summer's NCBA business meeting. It continued to work up until the time of the February 2020 NCBA annual conference, and the resolution for transparency and product labeling was presented, and it was passed because we brought leaders together to understand that no, we're not proposing mandatory, labeling here that might have violations or implications with the World Trade Organizations, might result in retaliatory tariffs. We were able to work through and dispel those concerns, which are the same concerns associated with mandatory mCOOL on that. And so it was adopted at NCBA. And, but again, it was adopted as a voluntary labeling program, not as a mandated program. So one could say that, well, it's not mandatory. Well, we've not endorsed any mandatory labeling. We're only supporting that, let's be truthful to the consumer in our marketplace on what we put on the label of the package of that beef product.
Yeah, definitely. And that was so exciting to just see the process of the grassroots members being able to bring a policy and make it such a national change. And it's so important to our members and our producers that we represent to have transparency in labeling and to give the consumers a choice also and know where their product comes from. And I guess that kind of brings us back to some issues that we're dealing with now as far as how to get the product to consumers. There's been a lot of scarcity or concern around meat packing facilities staying open across the country. And so what we're trying to do is connect them on a state level. And so is there any advice or information you could have to our producers who are trying to reach those consumers?
Well, there's a lot of interest of being able to reach consumers at the state level. In fact, yesterday, Congressman Greg Walden announced his support for the PRIME Act. The PRIME Act would be federal legislation that's being considered that would remove some of the USDA inspection requirements for beef so that they could be sold intrastate at the state level. So Oregon Cattlemen's Association, we're following that right now. I know Jerome has been in conversation with Oregon Department of Agriculture. We're considering reaching out through ODA and USDA so that the states could be able to, provide the necessary regulation important to the public's health on the safety of beef products sold locally. For our producers is a good one because it will potentially allow producers to play at a higher level in that vertical, food chain, supply chain of delivering from ranch to the dinner plate for producers. And I know some of our producers have been wanting to do that efficiently anyhow. So it's a good opportunity. It's good at this time. Going into a grocery store and seeing the beef section empty because of any panic buying that has occurred is not a good thing. Again, we don't have a beef supply shortage here in the United States. Our problem is in that supply chain of getting it to the consumer plate. And so what we're proposing with the direct marketing from ranch to consumer is will be helpful in that. We just got to make sure that we do it and we still can maintain and protect the public's health.
Definitely. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how this situation will impact us long term in the cattle industry, but also as a society as a whole. I'm looking forward to producers being able to connect to consumers more. I think this is a great opportunity for that to happen. So you kind of touched on this a little bit in your article for the magazine this month, but is there a silver lining to everything that is happening right now? As we just mentioned, this is an opportunity for consumers and producers to come together. And so what else do you see happening for the cattle industry?
Well, I think, I think we need to look for the silver lining and capitalize on those opportunities. I'm not sure we have a silver lining for everything that's been happening.
Right.
But clearly, this is an opportunity to learn how to do business more effectively, perhaps better in the future. I think that at the consumer level, there's a recognition that the basic need of the human body is food, and that food plays the essential role of the priorities of what we do as a world. We're going to learn other lessons as well. I think we're going to gain much greater transparency in the beef supply chain here through the investigation efforts that we've requested that are ongoing. I think through pricing transparency, there's this fall is a 5-year renewal of mandatory price reporting regulations. I think that provides us an opportunity to say, hey, something isn't right in the pricing and the profitability amongst the various segments of the supply chain here in the beef and cattle industry, like that. We're going to learn other things. We're going to learn, is there a need for more packing houses to distribute the risk so that we don't have all of our beef in the same basket? And if, one packer house goes down, we're vulnerable to capacity issues. So if we're able to expand that part of the supply segment with more distribution of where the beef product is being processed and packaged, that could be a good outcome. We're going to learn about doing business through webinars and Zoom technology and telecom. That's going to present us, recognition that rural broadband technology for internet service to the industry is very important as we move ahead, just as it is for telemedicine for our rural, hospitals and public health departments there. There's other ways of doing business that I think we're going to learn from this experience that will have advantages as we look ahead.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a brave new world out there. Well, Tom, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and for doing this interview. And like you mentioned, testing out this new technology and a new way to communicate directly to our membership and to continue our messages that we're working on a daily basis. One last question. What are you looking forward to the most once all social distancing barriers are broken down?
I'm looking forward to getting out, getting the haircut, having that steak at, one of my favorite restaurants. But I'm looking forward to getting back amongst the people. Fortunately, I hit that pretty hard when I became the Oregon Cattlemen's president the first of the year. And I continued that up until early March when things were shut down by executive order for social distancing. And I missed that because that's how you get, the grassroots input that's important to our industry and to our members. I'd also like to end and say that, think of mom this weekend. We got Mother's Day coming up on Sunday. Make sure you take good care of mom. Remember her, give her a phone call. keep her in your memories. And also remember to get out and vote. We have some important elections coming up here at the state level, as well as the congressional level. Oregon Cattlemen's Association, we have endorsed Senator Cliff Benz as our preferred candidate in this primary election coming up. The Benz family is generational. They were some of the first members of Oregon Cattlemen's Association when it started by Cliff's great grandfather back in 1913 era. So they're a great ranching family. Cliff is he's a smart guy that distinguishes himself as knowing the issues that are important to the constituents. And we hope that Cliff will be successful in resuming the good work that Representative Greg Walden has provided in service to this congressional district for many, many years. So thank you, Robin, for doing this. I hope we can do it again. I think it'll only get better in time.
I think so. Thank you, Tom, so much.